Hey guys, welcome back to We're Fucked Until We're Not, a podcast talking all things climate change and sustainability, including what we can do, what we have been doing, and maybe most importantly, what not to do for 15 minutes or less every Wednesday. Environmental education has been really kumbaya lately, and as much as I love optimism, I want to also be straight up with everyone, and this is a place where I can do it. I'm your host, MK, and I'll be doing this every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. Before we go ahead, feel free to give us a follow on Instagram at We're Fucked Pod. That is at the letter R, FVCKED pod. I also put the @ in the description as well as our email, so if you want to reach out about anything, don't hesitate. Now let's get right into it. This week, we'll be taking our talents north and looking at the Arctic Circle. I'll cover Antarctica in a later episode, but the Arctic is taking a lot of heat both literally and figuratively right now. A lot of climate activists and politicians have been talking about the region because our planet's warming, while it's been dramatic in all parts of the globe, it's hit the Arctic worst of all. And the oldest and thickest ice in the Arctic has already declined 95% in the last 30 years alone, so it's all going to be gone really, really soon. You'd think countries that are up north would be going into panic mode, right? But countries like the United States and ones even further up north like Canada and Russia are thrilled about the ice melting. To these countries, it's all about the economy, right? Melting ice in the Arctic opens up shipping routes, which decreases the cost of shipping a lot, as well as the amount of fuel used when getting from point A to B. So these countries are saying things like, oh my god, reducing the amount of fuel we use is so much more sustainable, so melting the ice in the Arctic is actually a good thing. Then they try to justify that even further by saying that because the Arctic won't be covered in ice anymore, they'll be able to extract things like oil or other natural resources including minerals, which would technically increase the estimated global supply of minerals that we have because they didn't really count what was in the Arctic Circle earlier. So because of those 2 points, they try to frame it as some kind of really, really good thing. Like, yeah, sea levels will rise a little bit, but things will get cheaper and the economy will get better, and we'll save the environment because we're using a lot less oil and fuel. But oh my goodness, that could not be further from the truth. First of all, that sea level rise isn't just going to be a little bit. On average, it'll go up 20 feet worldwide if the Greenland ice sheet alone melted. So anyone that's not a climate scientist thinks that a 20-foot sea level rise isn't that much, which makes sense because if you go to a beach, 20 feet does not seem like that much, but it has a lot of impacts worldwide. This really endangers coastal cities, including ones in wealthy countries, like areas of Florida in the United States, but it really endangers people living in island nations in the Pacific the most. Sea level rise is a really big reason as to why there's supposed to be over 1 billion climate refugees by 2050. For reference, that's 1 per second from now until 2050. These communities are forced to relocate, but other countries don't always want to accept refugees, and because they tend to be of lower income, they don't really have the means to move anywhere else or have any place to go. But because they don't stand to gain from the economic benefits, and because they don't have any real representation, developed countries trying to say that the Arctic is melting just ignore them or kind of drown out their concerns. I can and will do a whole episode on climate migrants later on, but let's focus on the Arctic. There's the issue of Al-bead-o that kind of comes in as well. The ice in the Arctic helps regulate our climate a bit, where it reflects the sunlight back up, which helps neutralize what's happening in the rest of the ocean, where it actually absorbs that sunlight as heat. So as the ice melts, there's less reflected, which is called albedo, meaning there's more absorbed by the ocean, which makes the ocean warmer, which melts more ice, and so on. So the more the ice melts, the faster it'll all happen, and the less time we'll have to prevent the worst parts of global warming happening. To make things worse, there's the issue of the permafrost melting. I guess the perma part of permafrost aged really poorly, but as that ice melts, the large amounts of methane that they have stored will be released, which will increase the rate of global warming, which will then melt more ice in permafrost and release even more methane. Basically, the more the ice melts, the more likely it is for the worst predictions of climate change to actually come true. Methane is also a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, so the more methane that's released into the atmosphere, the faster our planet will warm compared to if that was carbon dioxide. There's also issues with the supposedly faster shipping routes that the Arctic provides. Say that there's an oil spill like there was with BP. Even if that ice melts, the Arctic is still relatively new and inaccessible, meaning it'll be way harder to clean up and control, which can wreak havoc on ocean ecosystems. But considering these people want the ice to melt, they didn't really care about the wildlife or the ecosystems in the Arctic anyway, but that's still a major loss if there's a spill. Long story short, like the name of our podcast suggests, we're fucked. Or maybe we're not. You see, scientists are testing out a solution in Alaska that they hope can transfer to the rest of the Arctic Circle. They want to rebuild that natural system with the least amount of intervention, and they kind of settled on their method with a kind of reflective sand. So the sand is actually made out of small and hollow glass microspheres, which are very, very reflective. So that help increase the albedo in the Arctic Circle, which can help delay or reverse the effects that climate change has had there. So this quote-unquote sand is actually really tiny powdered glass, with each being 65 micrometers. For reference, some cells are 1 micrometer. There's a lot of debate about geoengineering, which I'll get to in a later episode, but the scientists behind this wanted to make their efforts as safe, reversible, and less intrusive as possible. The beads can easily be taken out if need be, and hopefully a time comes relatively soon where they don't need them anymore. But the biggest issue that they had to combat when making these was wildlife. Luckily, these beads don't cause any health problems in the birds and fish that ate them, so at least there's no issue of harming wildlife. So hopefully their experiment works as well as they want them to, and they can move it from Alaska to parts, if not all of the Arctic Circle. I know I've touched on a lot of things lightly today, so if you ever want some more in-depth stuff, definitely reach out. Before I sign off, I just wanted to talk about a couple quick things. First of all, the contributions you guys have made after the last 2 episodes have meant a lot. I've already made sure to thank everyone personally, but I just wanted to mention it on here because it seriously does mean a lot, and everything I get from contributions goes right into the podcast. This week, I used what I got to make the room I record in a bit more soundproof to help make the quality of the podcast better. A couple people have already asked me through email asking me how to do so, and first of all, that's incredibly sweet, but if you do want to contribute in any way, you can visit the link in the description. As for sponsorships, I try to keep them relevant, and as the podcast grows, I plan on donating about 20% of what I get out of sponsorships to grassroots climate action organizations, and I'll give whichever organization I donate to a shout out, so you guys can also check it out and donate as well. I've also noticed that most of the listeners that have reached out to me have been emailing me, which is great, and I love email, but since the listeners tend to be in the age group of 18 to 23, if you have Instagram, you can totally DM us there. The username is in the episode description. And if you want to learn about the stuff I skimmed over in episodes, or you want more resources, or you're magically falling in love with me, you can email us or DM us on Instagram, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. I'm really looking forward to watching this grow, and it's been really cool to see all the outreach and engagement we've gotten after only 3 episodes. So it'll be great to keep educating myself and other people with this podcast. I'll see you guys next Wednesday.